Virtue and courtesy. Catharism developed in Europe through the 12th century until the middle of the 13th. Then it started its decline that coincided so exactly with the time of Dante's life. But as we have seen, Dante did not speak about it in any of his works. He mentions Friar Dolcino, puts in Paradise characters unpopular in the church like Joachim of Fiore and the Averroist Siger of Brabant, saves an entire array of the excommunicated, but he never names the Cathars, and yet he couldn't have not known them. Of some among the numerous Florentine families who adhered to Catharism, we know their names through the trials that took place, so it will be easy to check if Dante quotes any of them among so many people. But beyond the names that have, as we will see, importance, there is something of more significance, and it is the great nostalgia for a world now gone. Many times Dante laments the decadence of the customs and the society in which he lives, compared to those of preceding generations. Regarding Florence, he has his ancestor Cacciagida say, "Florence, within her ancient ring of walls, sober and chaste, lived in tranquillity." Paradise 15, 97-99. Page 63. Following a series of 12 verses, in which a good 7 begin with a no to speak of that which is no more, not in peace, not sober, not moderate, they are losing the characteristic virtues of Catharism. Then Cacciagida lists a series of families, and among the first names that of the Nerli, who adhered notoriously to Catharism. The blame for this decadence is indicated. It is the people who, in the world, go most astray, there where, every day, Christ is both sold and bought. The papal curia, as they all say, where Christ is marketed every day. The regret for that lost world resounds often, in the whole and among the kingdoms. In hell, where the damned are unaware of happenings in the present, they ask if courtesy and valour still abide within our city as they did when we were there, or have they disappeared completely? Inferno 16, 67-69. Dante responds, not losing the occasion to roar his indignation. Newcomers to the city and quick gains have brought excess and arrogance to you. Inferno 16, 73-74. Pride and excess are exactly the opposite of virtue and courtesy, a pair of virtues that correspond to the prets and paratges of the troubadours, terms that, in the Song of the Albigensian Crusade, recur almost excessively. Many are the passages, for us boring, in which are listed names of unknown persons, either to praise the virtue in them that is now obsolete, or to inveigh with scorching words against the breed so arrogant and dragon-like in chasing him who flees, but lamb-like, meek to him who shows his teeth or else his purse. Paradise 16, 115-117. Page 64. Dante's disgust for this world without moral values, in which the vulgarity of excess is becoming the rule, is absolute, and heartbreaking is his nostalgia for a world that he has never really known but is now agonizing over. Don't wonder, Tuscany, if I weep when I remember the ladies and the knights, labours and leisure, to which we once were urged by courtesy and love, where hearts now host perversity. Purgatory 14, 103-111. It is irritating to read the comments that in the face of this continuous regret of Dante's for the disappearance of courtesy, never ask, seriously, what is it all about? It is irritating to read the comments that in the face of this continuous regret of Dante's for the disappearance of courtesy, never seriously ask what it is all about. If Dante laments its absence, it doesn't seem reasonable to me to define courtesy as that which is endowed with the individual qualities of those who live in the court, for the simple fact that the courts had not disappeared, and we still see the labours and leisure, or rather, as is usually intended, the wars and the sweet life. One can speak generally about gentlemanly virtues because none of them have disappeared. All this remained. What then was courtesy? Dante explains it in the banquet, where he says, "And the wretched herd should not be deceived by this word either, thinking courtesy no more than generosity. Courtesy and nobility are one and the same, and because virtue and good manners were practised in the courts in time past, while the contrary is now the case, the word was derived from court, and courtesy was the custom of the court. If the word were derived anew from the courts of today, especially those of Italy, it would mean only baseness." At this point, we must ask ourselves what the beautiful customs consisted of and that were practiced in the courts of the past, or rather what changed from the preceding generations and those in which it had fallen to Dante to live in. The Guelphs had replaced the Ghibellines in control of the city, a bit like today when a government of, page 65, the right succeeds one of the left, even if at the time the altercation was very bloody. The adversaries were killed or exiled, and their houses razed to the ground. However terrible and inhumane this can appear to our eyes, this was rather the common practice in those times. Also, the Ghibellines did likewise when they came into power. There is no doubt that Dante, taking his exile into account, held a grudge against Guelph dominion over his city. But I don't believe that this might be the reason for the indignation that permeates all of his work, and above all the Divine Comedy, and that with this change of the guard he considered that courtesy had failed. But also because, as the interview with Farinata attests, these changes were already taking place for some time, and were, then as today, frequent enough. From a certain time, however, something came into play that was different and more important. The victory of the Guelphs had brought with it a significant change in the daily life of the courts and the Italian cities. As Anne Brennan writes, never had a bishop or a papal sovereign the means to eliminate Catharism in Italy, at least until the victory of the Guelphs. When the Guelph party took over the sovereignty from the Ghibelline resistance, aristocratic and citizen, thanks to the intervention of Charles of Anjou, the Inquisition began to operate and the fires were lit. Dante could not say it and did not say it, but this was the great difference. The presence of the Inquisition had changed the atmosphere everywhere, both in the Guelph courts and the surviving Ghibelline courts in which he had found a welcome. The lovely customs that had been anciently used in the courts were due to Catharism, which was not only a faith, it was a way of life, a system of religious values, but also social. One thinks of the recognition of women, and cultural. And this, only this, and not more, it is this system of values that Dante calls courtesy, and provides us with the coordinates of it. Within this territory watered by the Adige and Po, one used to find valour and courtesy, that is, before Frederick had his quarrels. Purgatory 16, 115 to 117. Page 66. Virtue and courtesy were present in Lombardy before what? Before the differences started between Emperor Frederick II, as all commentators annotate. This great emperor, lover of peace and culture, he founded the University of Naples, and his court was one of the most important cultural centres, was excommunicated a good 3 times, 1227, 1239, 1245, and died in 1250. A most important date, which signals the beginning of the decline of that Italy in which courtesy and virtue were usually found. It's interesting that in another occurrence in which Dante uses the word quarrelling, he does so to indicate the conflict with the Cathars, when he will say that with Dominic and the Dominicans, the Holy Church defended and won its civil strife in the field.